Hey everybody, welcome to another Retro Game Net. I am Damien DiCarlo. I am player one as per usual. I am also with a few other people today. I have player two, Earl Lawrence. What's going on, sir?
Good man. Another day here,
Another day in
having
the
a good
retro gaming.
time. Another Damon retro game for sure.
Love it. Also got player three. We have a brand new person with us. Michael Losi, what's going on, sir?
How's it going? Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. We are so happy to have you here, man. We have a great episode. I have a feeling that today it's going to be an episode that people will really take to heart and they will find really great nostalgia. We are going to be talking about two games, but really it's one. We're going to be talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the arcade game. The arcade game had as we know, a cabinet release. This was back in 1990 or 1989, sorry. We also had an NES version that came out. So there's going to be two different games to talk about, but we're going to go back and review. This is going to be by way of release of the Cowabunga collection, and this is something you can get on most platforms. You get on the PS5, the PS4, the Xbox One, Xbox X series. So there's plenty of different versions, but we're going to be going off of specifically the Switch version. So let's do this. Plenty to talk about. Michael, you and I kind of started going back a little bit, and I really like this whole thing of the nostalgia factor, as you know. That's the main thing of Retro Game Night. We have right now in this collection 13 or 12, I lost count. There's so many games, but we chose the arcade game specifically because of its influence, the arcade cabinet, memories. Tell me about what you remember about the game when you first played it. How old were you? How many quarters did it take? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. And once again, I'm really excited just to be on this podcasting journal because as grown up, this just being in the arcade systems, being with the NES growing up, like this is what kind of brought my whole childhood together. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles obviously is probably one of the pinnacle titles when it comes to that. And I know we were playing the game a little bit earlier and we're kind of reflecting on, just what this meant to us. And
Absolutely.
to me, when I think of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is one of my childhood favorite cartoons, right? But when it came to the video games, if we all remember the first one, the very first original Teenage, it was so hard. It was probably one of the hardest games known to date. It was just extremely difficult.
Absolutely impossible.
Yeah.
If you could just even figure out the 2D landscape of that, then you felt accomplished in itself, right? So this was a game that I felt was extremely revolutionary. The side scrolling, just the enemies popping out at you. It was totally cool for at that time because it was RADD at that time, right? And there was something very ingrained that you could just get in tuned with, and I think we're going to find out pretty soon. But it was the music, and it was that constant coming of enemies at you and everything else, and that's really what made this game really fun. And I think as you can see, subsequent games they tried to really build on top of that, and I think that's what makes this game so awesome.
I'm gonna say, like, I remember, man, you're taking me back. So 1989, we had just heard, and I mean, I'm really scratching at the old memory here, but we had already a trailer out. I was like 8 years old, 7 years old. We had a trailer out for. No, I was younger then. I might have been like 5 or 6. Now that I think of it, we had a trailer for the movie,
Yeah.
the Turtles movie. And then you get this release of an arcade game to basically coincide with the release because it came out in 1990, the movie. And I remember I mean, I had to wait in the line to play the game as a kid. Like it was just like it was a line just to play it. So I remember it was always feeding the quarters. It was always playing with three other guys. Sometimes there was every now and again a gamer girl that would come in and be like, "Oh, cool, a gamer girl." Like you, that's all you would know because there was no Twitch streaming, there was no Instagram or Facebook to see who was gaming as whoever you knew in school, right? So that was our social network. It was our networking was in arcade games. It was getting to know each other in competitive like forms. So I think it was really genius to get this game to coincide with the movie release. And
Yeah.
for me, going back, I to this day, I mean, your background, Earl. I mean, it's sending me waves of just nostalgia. I can smell the arcade
Yeah.
itself. Like
Yes.
I can't even tell you what kind of smell it is. I just know it, and it takes me back with this particular game. So, I'm gonna say with this, I just the nostalgia is just insane. Earl, what were some of your thoughts when playing this? Because we had just played this
Right.
this evening
Good.
right before this recording. Tell me some of the memories or some of the new things you noticed.
No, I think this, again, it brings a whole nother level of nostalgia. I think the pop culture at the time, growing up as a kid, and you're like, these Ninja Turtles are so cool. And then they had different personality types, and you could gravitate towards each one. And like, my brother would always gravitate towards Leonardo, and I would gravitate to Donatello, but everyone had its own personality. And
Everyone had
again,
their
this
own
whole,
turtle.
yeah, the
Yeah.
pop culture of it, like we had backpacks, we had our lunch boxes, everything was Ninja Turtles at the time. We were watching these movies and then these, Saturday morning cartoons, and then they're like, "Wait, hold on, we're gonna release a video game." And we would play these video games, just be involved in it, and it was that whole nother aspect of it. So it kind of drew us in, and genius minds of the creators of Ninja Turtles, and shout outs to them, even the comic book and everything. This really touched all aspects of in our sense of the world now, or what it would be as pop culture, because you're just like, holy, this is crazy. Like everything that you wanted to do or be or play, the video game aspect changed the whole level up a notch, because now you could play these characters. You're playing with your friends, 4-player mode on an arcade. You're playing with quarters and there's a line to play. And I remember the same thing what you were talking about, Damien, and they're just like, well, no, I have next. Like, no, you wanted to beat the game. Like, you were there to play the game, beat the game, feel the level. Like Michael talked about the music,
Right.
all those like hype stuff, and you're just like, oh, it's so cool.
Do
But
you
yeah,
guys
it brought a
remember
lot.
how you would tell your line of players who was next?
Yeah.
Do you remember how to do it?
Yeah, put the quarter right on top.
You put the quarter right on
On
top.
the
And
glass.
that's
If your
like a
quarter's
thing
not on the glass,
nobody
you're not
will
in.
know.
Yeah, yep.
You just, unless you were from that generation, you go up to the thing, and if
Yeah.
someone's playing it, you respectfully give them
Right.
their space, but you place the quarter right on top. Like, I got
Yeah.
next game.
And you're
How
like,
high is
hold
your
on,
stat?
wait. Just
How
because
high
you
is
put a
it?
quarter there doesn't mean I don't have quarters in my pocket, because I'm holding
Exactly.
the joystick and I'm pressing these buttons.
It reserved your spot when that guy or girl decided to be like, done.
I loved it. I
I'm
loved it.
done. I can't do any more quarters. And you're like, my quarter's right there.
Yep. And little did they know they're putting a quarter there, and you have a pocket full of quarters. You're like, no, I'm gonna finish the game today. You could play the
Right.
next player. Yeah, it was so cool. And you're bumping elbows with like random people in the game, because again, the arcade game was a 4-player game, and you would just have those functions. The jump. I mean, we're talking about the moves, right? You could do the jump kick and all this, and we can go deeper in it. It's so cool.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the
Ooh.
four-player aspect.
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of had this made for an arcade game. There's four turtles, and
Right.
you have already an uber popular, successful comic book and animated show.
Yeah.
It was like made to be an arcade game. So this was 4-player, 4 joysticks, 2 buttons each, because that's it wasn't intricate controls. It was either
Yeah.
punch or jump or kick
Jump
or
in
whatever.
action. Yeah. Jump in
Yeah.
action.
I mean, it was just so that's as simple as it gets, and yet that's your first multiplayer experience. Like literally, that is like your major first one where it's in person in a public setting,
Right.
other than being at home with your respective system at the time console. That would be 2-player. I know that the NES
Different.
had
It's
the
different.
ability to have the
Yeah.
hookup for like four, but it was special games. It was like a sports game, or it wasn't like every game had the ability to do four players. So when you had a game like this, four player, it was a huge thing and brought
Yeah.
everybody together.
Yeah, it's the rumble in the jungle. Like, let's all play, let's all get through the stages, and here comes the Foot Clan coming from all angles, and you're like, you cover the bottom right screen, you cover the left screen. No, it was so cool.
Yeah, there was definitely some great nostalgia. I will say that the effect of this game, there was many releases to put the most popular, I would say, and maybe in my opinion, but maybe people will disagree, but I will say the NES version was the most popular port. There was other ports done, such as the ZX Spectrum, the Amiga, the Amstrad, the Atari ST, DOS PC, Commodore 64. There was different versions of the arcade game, but the NES version to me was the one that stuck out the most. That was the most talked about in my school when I was a kid. It was a big deal when that came home. That was like I don't have to go to the arcade anymore. Like that was a big deal.
Yeah. How cool was it though? Like the whole storyline is has this medieval aspect, right? So like here we are, let's say turtles, but knights, but you're saving a princess, April O'Neil, and
The
through the whole
damsel in
aspect, you're like,
distress.
okay, cool, let's
Yeah.
the damsel in distress, and here's the evil shredder, and it's just one of those like really cool storylines that still lives on to this day where you just want to be involved in it and absorbed it, and again the culture of it, the pop culture of it, it was so cool. I know Michael has a lot
How
to
did
say
we
too.
feel about
That's
the
that.
movie? How did we feel about the movie, guys? Did we watch that? We saw that all when we were younger, right? You saw that, Earl? You were younger.
Yeah,
I know like some
of
parents were
course,
like,
all of
kind
them.
of careful with their kids watching that. My parents didn't care, but I mean, some kids did, have parents like that.
Come
Um,
on, Damien. I mean, that was all the movie that we could all get to, right? And feel hip hop and cool because
Yeah,
Vanilla Ice was in it.
Ninja,
And we were just
Ninja
all
Rap.
getting down. The Ninja Turtles were doing the break dance, right? They're
That's
doing
right.
yeah,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
floor.
I mean,
And
the
so it
nostalgia
was so
goes with the movie too. I gotta say, it has to be hand in hand a little bit.
it was super trendy, and honestly, yeah, it was all the rage at that time. And to see that it still had that carry on throughout these entire years, it's incredible. And I know we talked slightly about earlier that how Shredder's Revenge, right? That Switch remaster piece really had its entirety was based off of this game that we're going to talk about tonight, and how the arcade game really, it kind of set the footprint for everything. It was the foundation for so many other games to continue in its place. So yeah, I
Absolutely.
think it's
Yeah.
pretty unique.
Shredder's Revenge. Now that is a game that just came out recently, 2022, to my knowledge. Unless it was this year. Was it this year? I don't remember. But that was as cheesy it'll sound as a game changer. But I mean, what it is that it is a brand new modern game, but it is a throwback in the way of gameplay. A little bit in graphics, even though it's obviously modernized and polished, and gave way to the release to the Cowabunga collection, which is what we played this on tonight.
yeah,
And just to
yeah.
kind of name off a little bit for the listeners that do not know what's on this, most do, but just in case you don't know, we have the 1989 release of the Turtles game for the NES, which is i.e. the hardest game ever. 1989's Turtles, the arcade game, which is what we're reviewing tonight. 1990 had the Turtles 2 arcade game for the NES. The next one would be the Fall of the Foot Clan, which is for Game Boy. Turtles in Time, which is the arcade version. Turtles 2 Back in the Sewers, which would be the Game Boy. Turtles 3 Manhattan Project for the NES. Turtles 4 Turtles in Time for the Super Nintendo. Turtles the Hyperstone Heist for Genesis. Turtles 3 for Radical Rescue for Game Boy. And then
Mm-hmm.
we have Tournament Fighters for both Sega Genesis and SNES and NES. So you had a huge collection with this. I mean, I think right now it's MSRP 40 bucks, 39.99, and you get
Yeah.
all of these games I mean, talk about a history lesson. You get like cover art, you get booklet art, you get like it
Yep.
is a museum that you get within the options of what you have to look back on with the history of turtles, and it's pretty crazy when you think about it. Like you were saying,
Yeah.
Michael, the impact that what it is even today. And you're a man with kids, and so are you, Earl. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the stuff that we can show our kids what we had, and like what affected our lives and what made us who we are.
I think that book art was really very impressive. When you showed me that, I was like, and you would see the actual game, and it was like, if you haven't subscribed to it or if you haven't had it or looked at it, check it out because you could see the game as you just bought it, and it brings you to the memories of like, oh my goodness, that's the cover, and there's the backing, and there's the artwork, and it's just, and for all in each and every game, it has that, and the instruction manual, which at that point, I was like, well, I didn't really care for the instruction manual, but you see that stuff into the game and how you can play it. It just again brings that whole other nostalgic feel of just you're just like, wow, that's so cool. Like I remember having that video game or waiting in line to buy that video game at KB Toy Store or whatever it was or wherever you
Oh
got it.
man, you just said KB Toy Story. That
Yeah.
oh man, tell me a way you're old without saying you're old. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I remember. Oh man, you had to say KB Toy Story. You
I
just got me
did.
out of this whole. For a second, I forgot I was on a podcast and I was in a different dimension. I remember KB Toy Store as like the thing that was my place, and of
But
course Toys R Us. That was like
yeah, that's
um,
what these games do. It brings you to a certain level in your life and you're just like, what? No way. Yeah.
yeah,
And I just totally had a total connection just with contemporary and things how things used to be. And with that game, like you were just saying, right? It was that artwork that was on the actual game itself, and not only that, the manual that came with it, right? And
Right.
that manual not only taught you how to do the game, but it actually gave you some of the story and some of the
Mm.
what
background, even
happened to
in the
manuals,
making of the
guys?
game.
What happened to
And
manuals? Like,
exactly. And I
God,
just happened,
why?
I
No,
just
it's
happened last week. I pre-ordered the new Zelda game that's coming out, right? And of
yeah.
course, when you pre-order a game, you're literally just getting that game, right?
That's it.
And of
Yeah.
Yeah.
course, on top of that, Nintendo, they're smart. They have a collector's edition. What else comes in the collector's edition? That is the artwork, and that's this and that. Everything that used to be included with everything that was great about a retro game. And so it's just it makes it's yeah there's it takes my heart in so many different places,
Yeah.
but just to know that that used to be all included, and there's something just so special about that initial
Yeah.
purchase.
Who would have thought, guys, that would have been a premium? Like, if you want any sort of paraphernalia with your awesome
Oh,
game, you have to pay extra.
absolutely. And that guess who's buying it? Us, the retro
Yeah, we're
gamers,
all
or the
gonna
people
buy
that
it.
played in
Yeah.
the past. My daughter wouldn't be like, she's like, I don't care about that stuff. She's like, let me just get the game and play it. There, yeah, it's like no instructions needed. Us, we wanted to know, the story and but I guess that's what of part of what we do. We tell them, we're gonna like, hey, this is the story about what's going on, and
Yep.
we'll play those old movies and play it for them, and then you can either absorb it or not. But that's what's the cool part of it. Like we live and we explain, tell stories, and I think that's really cool. And I would totally buy the more expensive version of that because it had all those other prestige items to get, which was cool. Thanks, Mike, for bringing that up.
It's gonna be a little cheesy and a little over dramatic for me to say, but it I have to laugh while I say it, but I mean, but it is real. This is like a legacy we passed down. Like it literally is, because like let's just
Yeah.
say we had a child that or listeners, if you have a child, an offspring that is actually interested in what you played, they actually
Yeah.
like love it and they want to keep playing it, and then they tell their kids about it, and I mean it could be like a legacy that passes on.
Totally.
And this is kind of a big thing for gamers because we already feel we're stuck in the feels when it happens, but if our kids understand that, it's gonna be like, well, mom or dad really love it that much. I can see why they love it. Imagine if they could understand. It's like that's what's crazy about it.
Yeah.
I think the whole thing of the buying the premium version, I'm all for it. I don't care. Take my money. Take my money. I don't care. As long as I get the good version and the premium package, I'll be fine. I'm happy, right? Um, so with
Can I just say something on top of that, Damien? Just real quick, and this had me thinking. It's crazy because we've just moved into this mindset of, I feel like, of what we used to think quality was, right? And nowadays, we used to nowadays it's all about all the peripherals and all the accessories that come with everything. But back then, it was just about everything that came within that initial package, right? And
right.
yeah, I just wanted to just make that quick comment. Yeah, I just feel like that was really strong, and yeah, you're totally right on that.
These dude, honestly, it's these kind of things that I don't think about until we're talking about it. And I mean, this is the essence of what retro game night is. And so, I mean, I've said this before, even at our panels we've had at Comic Con. But the reason it started and the way it's been asked me, like, why do this? Like, what is the motivation other than you guys are a bunch of freaking nerds? Okay, is that I remember the first time I did this, I was playing retro game night. It was called retro game night. Just a bunch of friends. We would get together, have some beers, have fun, play the games, and we would be like, I just want to beat the game. I want to know what the ending's like. And there was one friend that came over one time without my typical group. He said, "Hey, I heard you do the retro thing." I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, come over, man." We started talking, doing it. He started talking and opening up about something really deep as we played his most favorite game. Next thing I know, the guy's tearing up about really personal things as a child.
What game?
And it was Super Mario World. And so as he's playing it, I'm stuck in the feels of like, this is great. And for him, he too, but he started tearing up and literally crying over it, tearing up. And that's when I knew that this is something that is a major, major impact. This is something that's not taken lightly. So absolutely, Michael, with what you're saying, every bit of this is legit. So you're in good company.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I just remember we were playing that game earlier, and it wasn't when we talked about what made that game great. Not a single time did we talk about the graphics, right?
Yeah,
It was about the
that's
music.
really funny, right?
No, exactly. It was about the music. It was about the things that made us emotional, right? It was all the emotional attachments that we had to that game, and
Right.
I just thought that was just super special. And yeah, that's just. I hope that we can further elaborate on that as we continue on this, because I mean,
Absolutely.
when you hear this soundtrack, you're just like, dude, yeah,
So playing it
let's
tonight, all the songs are stuck in my head, and I love it. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
So moving on, we got two different versions to talk about. So we have the arcade version. We basically talked about that. It would take $1,000 in quarters. We got that. But with this version, obviously,
mode.
in the Cowabunga version, you had some of the games you could put God mode, which takes one hit for an enemy and you're good. You can just go through the whole game. Another option was to get on some of the games. You can do save states, so you can save your progress and just go back to it later if you wanted to. Every game on the Cowabunga collection has a rewind feature, so you can literally hit a button. It's so easy to hit that I've hit it so many times, as you guys remember, that you could rewind literally anything you've just done. So if you're playing, i.e., Turtles NES, the hardest game ever, you can keep rewinding and redoing the move that you keep failing at. So the arcade version had some of that with it. It had some enhancements. The game itself has either the 4x3 or you can do widescreen. It also has borders you can add if you're big on the borders with the art on the side. I think it's kind of cool. I believe the stages were only like 6 or 7 stages long for the arcade game, so it's a very short game. I would say some of the pluses of the arcade version, aesthetically speaking, when I look at it, was that for such an old game, it could handle, as we played it with 4 players, all the chaos happening. You had, whether they were sprites or whatever you want to call them, they were just everywhere, and it handled it pretty well. There was times with lag, obviously, because being from 1989.
Yeah.
So I would say it really held up as far as being fun. The music was good. Um,
Well,
obviously the
how good was the competition in itself? So we found out there's like a hit points or how many people you could kill,
yes,
which I didn't realize
I
until
never
we
knew there was a
played
score.
today.
I knew there was a score. I didn't pay attention.
Of
Yeah,
course, Mike, go ahead,
Of
Mike.
course. I
He's
mean,
like, yeah,
I
top
had to
Chris
three.
make I had
Michael
to make I had to make sure that you guys
took the
made
trophy on that one.
knowledge of it because I
I
was doing pretty well. So
I didn't realize that until like, midway through we were playing. I'm like, oh well, who has we are like, oh my gosh, Mike has like he's up to like 79 and here we are at like 60s and I'm like, oh, I didn't know they were scoring, but now we really got competitive to try to like one up each other. It was that was one thing that was not at least when I was playing decade ago or so. It just adds that really cool thing.
Yeah, I would say that the arcade version was your classic fun. It was a
Yeah.
classic fun that isn't always had anymore with games such as that, unless it's an arcade throwback.
Yeah.
Um, now, going to the NES version, Michael, you and I connected well on this one because I feel that the NES version, Turtles 2, the arcade game, was obviously based of the one we're talking about, but you had a more challenge in the sense that you didn't have quarters, you had certain amount of life and then you had certain amount of continues and that was it. That was literally it. Even if you had a bazillion quarters, you couldn't get through it unless you did pretty well in the game. There was no
Mhm.
difficulty changes. You couldn't make it easy. You could make it harder. So you basically got what it was. Uh, and I think, in my opinion, from playing with like my cousins and people, friends when I was a kid, it always was easier with a second player. Because if it was just one player, I don't know. It's just my thing. It just wasn't easy. So, um, thoughts on the Turtles 2 game for the arcade for the NES, Michael? Shoot, tell me what you were thinking.
well, for the NES, okay. Well, because I was just gonna briefly just say the arcade game obviously had certain pros, right? And obviously the ability to have more than two players was um, the big cool thing, right?
Right.
And what, like you kind of said, like having more players just seemed more fun. And it became more chaotic with the more players you had. So of course, it's just like it was just more engaging, right? But it lacked in a lot of other ways and in more than just the graphics, right? I think a lot of people kind of got stuck on graphics with the NES being 8-bit. And of course, you kind of mentioned the sprites, right? And
Right, right.
you would see like some of that glitching happening during certain levels when things would get chaotic during the NES level. But in a weird, strange way, that's kind of what made the game cool to me too. So
Right.
like I kind of loved having that old school feel. And to be honest with you, and I'll kind of go back to what I was mentioning earlier, that was better than the arcade version was totally the soundtrack.
A
Um,
bold statement. That's a bold statement.
it
Yeah.
was so much more basic too. And it's like
Yeah.
to be a more basic of a sound, but be just so much more dynamic and so much more memorable, in my opinion. I think that's the biggest thing, right? It's what do we?
Earl's face right now. It's
It's
like,
it's
"Ah,
like
I don't know.
it's like what do we
I totally agree with
remember?
you. I agree with
Yeah.
you. And that's I'm gonna say it. Yeah, I think the NES version had um first of all there was two extra levels. You had a Central Park snowy level with a
No,
brand new
yeah.
boss.
Yeah.
The music was really cool in both of these, well, all of these levels. But yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on that. I think that the arcade version, um, it gave me like a reason to go to the arcade. It was such a huge thing, but yet when this came out to take home, I kind of forgot about the arcade version, like the actual arcade one. I'm like, this is not only good enough, it's great. Like I'm really happy with it. So I know that this point when it came out, it was after the movie's release. It was the hype was already through the roof. Like it came out at the perfect time for a home release. Um, the graphics, though, obviously suffered, and we know that. I mean, it's an 8-bit. I would say that the I don't know this for a fact. I don't know any techs about the arcade game, but I would venture to say it's a 16-bit, if anything. But 8-bit, yeah, you definitely felt the you felt the drawback a little bit. You could tell that it was not what we had just played in the arcade version. Yet the music really made up for it. The controls just as easy. I'm good with it. I really am good with it. Other than the only complaint I would say is that it wasn't 4 player.
Yeah.
We had for the NES at the time a 4 player connection thing. It was like a port you could buy. I mean, just saying you could do it, but I know for a fact, and I think we even commented about this, the sprites on the NES was a bit insane with just 2 players. So I can't imagine trying to do 4. That's a lot
Yeah.
for an 8-bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I get it. I get why they didn't do it. Earl, you had some pretty you had some pretty bold statements about the NES version. Would you like to tell us what you're thinking?
Yeah, no, I thought that. Oh gosh, here we go. Well, the NES version was really, I mean, it's pixelated comparison to the cabinet version. No, I think the whole NES version, I don't say it was, they had to step it up, right? So they stepped it up, add the 2 levels, but there was just different. It just had a different scheme, right? So like Leonardo's swords weren't as swords; they looked like a little smaller. I mean, the characters were a lot
Right?
smaller in my opinion, but I just thought, I mean, if I were to rank 1 and 2, I mean, we'll do the rankings later, but I,
You weren't feeling it. I don't think you were feeling it though.
not as
Not
much,
as much as the arcade, I think, right?
not as much tonight, but overall, again, playing Ninja Turtles was it's such a cool thing. Like even today, you're just like, yeah, I played Ninja Turtles. Like, no, it's that it has its thing, but the 2 different versions, which is I think what we did tonight was cool. We played both versions and we're able to see, how it played out. But yeah, even Bebop and Rocksteady look so different versus what it was,
Yeah.
from each one, and you could, tell by all the stages too. And there was like I guess you guys found like a Easter egg on the NES version where you could, cover one of the holes and just whatever. Yeah.
We were hitting all the mousers and the
Yeah.
as they were coming out of the hole, the one of the stages. But yeah,
Stage 3, I
that
think,
was a
was
thing.
the sewer
Yeah.
stage. Yeah. And that was, you're like, oh, check it out.
Screen locking enemies, and
Yeah.
you got to figure out all the things that you could do in NES that wasn't really
I'll say
unique.
this: it was a lot easier to pull that off in the NES than it was in the arcade version. The
Oh, for
arcade
sure.
version didn't allow for that kind of crap. It was like, I
Absolutely.
don't
And
care
that's
how
what
much you keep pushing.
yeah.
But there
um,
was slightly different enemies, right? And a few of them.
yeah.
There was
So we had
slightly
the
different
Yep.
two.
enemies.
Well, for sure, we had a whole stage of the snowy Central Park, and then we had more of like an Asian Japanese theme in one of them. And you had
Yeah.
these guys that looked like they had elongated arms that kind of reminded me of like Ninja Gaiden. Like it just reminded me of that.
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
Robo-
so
And they
that
had no, you're absolutely right. We talked on it. We're like, this person looks different. Yeah. And then like the enemies, we had one that was gold from the cabinet version, and then that same enemy was red, and we just didn't know like why it was that way. But yeah.
in 2019, I don't know if I'm sure you guys remember this, and they most GameStops or WalMarts or wherever they sold it, Arcade One Up released a mini. I say mini because it was about half the size of a
Yeah.
cabinet of an actual Turtles arcade,
The tabletop.
which to this day is totally sold out. Like you
Yeah.
can't find it anywhere. Like
And props.
it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
So
props to Arcade One Up because they know what's up at the end of the day. Like they
yeah,
came out with all of the, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but they always coming out with some really cool stuff. So
such respect. Almost every Comic Con, at least the past 3 years I've gone, they've been there, and you could try their stuff out before it comes on
yeah,
the market. And they just have they're like us. They're guys that just like
totally.
wanted to
Arcade One
just
Up, we're
do
looking
it.
for a sponsor, just saying.
Yeah,
So,
just say Arcade One Up, hit us up. We
yeah,
love you.
yep,
But yeah, they keep
Nostalgia,
releasing these
the
games, but
nostalgia is real.
the nostalgia is huge, and not only
absolutely.
the game, but they release the cabinet to look like the OG of whatever the game was. But yeah, I thought that was a cool note to bring up with the 2019 release of theirs. You can still get every other Arcade One Up cabinet, to my knowledge, except
Yes.
the Turtles 4 player
Ooh.
arcade one. Like you can get the Turtles in Time one, but not the Turtles, the one we play tonight. So that speaks volumes with this kind of game. So
And there's
um,
go ahead.
yeah, I'm just gonna say that it was great. I will finish off what we're gonna do before we do our ratings to talk a little bit about the ratings as far as the NES version specifically, since the arcade mostly received positive. As we know, there wasn't really a rating system for an arcade cabinet, but GamePro gave it a 23 out of 25 for the NES, 26 out of 40 for the Famicom. As we know, that's the NES in Japan. Um, we might as well just get into the rating system because I'm about to just give out, my whole feelings on it. So we're gonna do two different ratings, and we do this in the most scientific, the most advanced, the most pristine, and the most brilliant way to rate something. Number one, we have showcase, which means you want to show it off. You want to tell your friends all about it. You want to put this on eBay and sell it for millions of dollars. You have one and done, which means you literally, like the time you had with you, we'll call you, maybe not. And then the last one is toilet paper, which means horrible.
Dinky.
Stinky.
Dinky.
So that's the three. That's the three rating system we have. Let's just get right into it. We're gonna do two separate ones. So right now, Mr. Earl Lawrence, let's get down to the first one, which will be the actual arcade game, the cabinet version, which you are going to rate right now. Tell us, what would you say
Okay.
and
We
why?
talked about the whole prestige of this. Um, Cabinet version for me takes the mantle, and I do want that cabinet in the house for sure. That'll be something so cool to have. For sure, it takes for me number one. It's that nostalgia feel. It's so cool to play and playing it for hours on end. However many quarters I've gave up to play that game, I would still mantle it to this day. Absolutely.
So would that mean you're giving it a showcase
I'm showcasing that all day. Yep.
all day?
Thanks.
Yeah, you can't get any more direct than that. Michael Losi, let's talk about the arcade game. What would you give it with the rating system that we have in place?
Man, falling off with Earl, I honestly have a lot to agree with him. I think this game was revolutionary in a lot of ways. However, I do think it did miss in a lot of factors. In the sense that I feel like if you were to spend $10 in quarters, you probably wouldn't spend another $10 in quarters on this game. You would probably be going to the next game or something else because it was the arcade version just had I think 5 or 6 levels. It was a little shortened version. Once you got through it, you kind of knew what to expect. I would give this a one and done.
Fair enough. I personally would say this is a showcase for me. I I don't feel right doing it a one and done, and the reason for that is just because the amount of it goes a little bit beyond nostalgia. It's kind of like a loyalty factor for me because this game in the arcade is responsible as to why I went to the arcade for other games. So for me, I'm gonna go with a showcase. Um, this was a major milestone in arcade gaming. I think that everyone would agree with me on that one. The only other one I could think of that would be this impactful that people remember, maybe not as successful, would be like the Simpsons arcade game. It was a
That
four player thing.
absolutely,
It was
absolutely
big.
that.
It was like people still to this day talk about it. I'm gonna put it up with that. That's why I'm saying it. I think it would be a showcase.
I
Now,
can't argue that. I still want that one up too.
yeah,
Yeah,
arcade one up. Everybody wants that one. So I mean, there's nothing. As much as you're one and done, you're not.
yeah. I'm Bart Simpson all
um,
day.
so for the next game, the NES Turtles 2 sequel to the Turtles 1 for the NES, Turtles 2, the arcade game, as we know, based on the actual arcade game we just gave a rating. Earl, tell us your rating on the NES version of that.
Okay, so after replaying it today, um, That to me will take a, I don't want to say a one and done, but it will be a one and done.
Oh
It's not,
man, at least you didn't give it toilet
yeah,
paper.
it's not toilet paper because I can respect, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle franchise enough. And I will never give anything, probably Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle a toilet paper because the movies and everything. It's a one and done. The graphics were, it is what it is, 8-bit system. The music was great. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't the cabinet version. The cabinet version was so cool to me where it set the bar. So to play it at home or to play it, on the NES version was kind of a little bit different. The expectation, I think I set the bar higher for an NES version to take home, but it's a one and done, not toilet paper, not a mantle worthy or a, the top, but it'll take a number two for me. I'd rather have the cabinet over the NES. So yeah.
Michael Losi, go to you. Let's rate
Uh-huh.
Turtles 2, the arcade game for NES. Take us there.
I think that's probably why I'm here, right? Because I respect Earl a lot, but I have to strongly disagree with him. And I think for a lot of good reasons, to be completely fair with you. I think the NES was the complete version that the arcade system actually wasn't. And I truly do believe that that soundtrack was so much more nostalgic. I to this, I played both versions tonight. I still have the freaking soundtrack going through my brain right now. I can't even get it out of my head. It's literally still going through there. And a couple of other things, like when Damien and I were playing earlier together, I was just like, dude, do you remember that snow level? Right. Um, you didn't get that in the arcade
It was
version.
all about the
And
snow
there,
level when we brought that up. We were
dude,
like,
I
yeah, the snow
love the
level.
arcade. I love it. And there's just those extra levels. It just made it just so much more complete. And I know you guys were talking about you would just love wasting quarters and this and that. I'm like, I loved wasting quarters on this game as well, but I'd rather waste it on Sunset Riders or I'd rather waste
Ooh,
it on
there
a
we
few
go.
other.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Bringing up
yeah.
another
Ah,
classic.
So,
I see what you're doing,
I
Michael. I
see
see
what
what
we're
you're
doing.
doing.
Next
I see
podcast.
you.
Okay.
you know, so I just feel like if there is some replay value, and when it came to quarters, I feel like there's just some other value and some other games. But for me,
Fair
this
enough.
NES game, this was the game to have. And when I come to look back at all the other entire NES library collection, like this is one of the ones that actually really stands out to me. And again, had so much more effect even to this day with Shredder's Revenge and everything else. I give this one a showcase. This one to me is an absolute must own. If you have the NES, um, this is it. This is, in my opinion, my personal opinion, top three game of the NES. Love it, hate it. I love it.
Brilliantly said. Let me tell you my rating, but this is why, kids. Listen up. The thing with this particular game in the NES, say what you will about it, I'm going to go with a showcase. And the reason why I say it's a showcase. Now, I already showcased the arcade version, but the reason why this needs to be showcased as well, you wouldn't have a brilliant, successful to the whole gaming industry, and I'm talking numbers, people. That's right, IGN, I'm looking at you. The numbers that have brought in by Shredder's Revenge, if you wouldn't had like if you wouldn't have had this home release. You could have had the arcade game come out. It could have been a big hit. No home release, I don't know if it would have done the same impact to do a home release like Shredder's Revenge, which is, as of right now, the most popular Turtles release. So, yes, I have to give it a showcase in its own form because this is something that is a cartridge release, home release, that publishers like Konami and those in Nintendo were like, holy crap, we got something really great here. It's not just something we, invested on that we didn't know how it was going to go. No, we knew it was Turtles. We knew it was going to be great, but even better as a home release. And that's why we have Shredder's Revenge, which is an amazing game. So
Yep.
I'm going to go with Showcase. I think either way, you viewers, you listeners need to download the Cowabunga collection. see it for yourself, play the other games. We probably most likely will review the other Turtle games in time. I meant actually literally in
No
time,
pun
not
intended.
turtles in time. I knew somebody would be like, "Oh, I see what you did there." No. Anyway, yeah, we will probably over a certain period of time we'll cover the other ones, but we had to pay homage to the original arcade release, so um, we definitely have a lot to talk about. We definitely love to hear from you guys. We do appreciate a lot. We can't mention everybody, but we do appreciate all the messages, the likes, and the comments on our Instagram. But before we go, definitely want to reach out to you two, my co-host Earl. Where can folks find you on social media?
Hey Earl Lawrence on Instagram and Earl.lags on Instagram. All of it.
Michael, where can folks find you on Instagram now?
You can find me on Instagram at Michael_Lohse, Lohse.
And all your shenanigans.
All my shenanigans. I'm not that fun. I'm just a boring dad.
No, you'd be surprised, folks. You might want to go in there. He builds arcade cabinets for fun, not money, for fun. Then yeah, you can find that out and talk about it later with him. You can find me at Damien_DeCarlo. Also, you can find me at makingitgeek.com. That's where all my podcast stuff is. Until next time, everybody, all I have to say to you is keep calm and game on. Good night, everybody.